This conference will now be recorded.
All right, the Town of Cottage Grove Plan Commission will hold a special public meeting on Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall at 4058 County Road. And you can join the meeting by GoToMeeting. We have a quorum present. The meeting was posted at the Town Hall and on the website. I'll call the meeting to order. If everyone would please sign in if you haven't in the back. And we're going to have a discussion of the comprehensive plan focused on future land use maps and policies, including opportunities for landowner input. And we have Mark, our planner here. Do you want to start or?
Sure. You ready for me? Grab the screen.
Let's start with the visions.
Yeah, I've got a little presentation to run through, and it'll get talk about the vision and several other things. So I'll go ahead and get started. And if you're at home and you can't hear me, or if you're here and you can't hear me, please let us know, and I'll try to talk louder. My name is Mark Roffers. I've been working with the town on planning matters for 7 or 8 years now, before that I worked a little bit for Dane County, got familiar with county planning and zoning matters as part of that job, and I do a lot of other work in different Dane County communities as well. I'm here with Nick Johnson. Nick works with me, and he's working with me on this plan here. So I've got a little dog and pony show to share with you, and this is an opportunity for questions, comments, and hopefully input on the direction the town is heading, the direction you'd like the town to head as it affects the entire 31.2 square miles, and as it may affect whatever acreage you own and where. This is a great opportunity to get in on the ground floor as the town works on a comprehensive plan update. So what I'd like to do with this presentation is talk a little bit about our planning process and how the town's comprehensive plan is laid out, what it is even. We did a community survey this spring, a few months ago. I'd like to share with you some of the results, particularly as they relate to community attitudes on future land use. We've also done some kind of statistical analysis of future land use demand and supply, and I'd like to share a little bit about that and about some of the things that we do as planners when helping towns prepare comprehensive plans and future land use maps within those plans. And then I'd like to share what is the current version of the future land use map for the town. It's to my left right now, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And then hopefully a lot of time for questions, input either tonight, and I'll provide an opportunity for those of you at home to share input digitally or verbally. And after tonight, there'll still be time to kind of think about things and get back to us before we move forward. So talk a little bit about the planning process here. What is the comprehensive plan? I appreciate that some of this is going to be very basic for some of you and perhaps not for others. But the comprehensive plan is a guide that the town uses for future preservation decisions, for decisions on growth and development. And it has a long-term time horizon. Over the next 10 to 20 years, it's intended to be a guide. It provides a vision for future land use, what different pieces of the town might be used for in the future, what density of housing, things like that. For farmland and natural resource preservation, using some guidance provided by the county and state. And for economic development and housing development in areas that are planned for that type of land use. The town's comprehensive plan is important. It's used by the town, this body, the Plan Commission, and the board in making decisions on rezoning, subdivision plats, certified survey maps, where a lot should be allowed and under what conditions and what size. And it's also used by the county in making those similar decisions. We're under county zoning here in the town of Cottage Grove, and that requires kind of collaboration and cooperation on the plan. And so having a clear plan is critical to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Why update the plan now? This process will result in a complete redo or update of the town's 2015 comprehensive plan. That doesn't mean we're going to change every word and every policy within the document. It just means it's a cover-to-cover review and update. The updates are required once every 10 years. So why are we doing this one after just 6? Well, first off, one reason is a practical one. We're able to take advantage of updated information from the U.S. Census, from the 2020 census, from a land use inventory that the county has conducted of showing what land is used for today and how much is in different classifications. So that's helpful. And that'll then put the town on a 10-year update cycle that makes sense when that data is available again in 2031, for instance. Now we just have to get the Census Bureau to cooperate with us and actually get the data out that they collected last March. It's been kind of caught in the Washington grinder for a while. The other reasons to undertake the plan update now is to revisit and possibly revise the town's future vision for growth and development. Over the last several years, the town has had a number of development proposals. Some of those proposals are clearly in line with the comprehensive plan and go forward. Other proposals sort of test the plan, and the town has considered amendments to the plan over the years in sort of a case-by-case or parcel-by-parcel basis. And I think now thought it was the time to look at the plan in a whole as to what we want to achieve as a whole, rather than just tackling it 40 acres or 80 acres at a time. And that relates to the last point too. The town, as I think you know, has areas that are planned for long-term farmland preservation, but also different areas that are planned for subdivisions and different areas still that are planned for commercial development. It's a good time to revisit things. And oh, by the way, you've got not one, not two, but 3 incorporated municipalities now that abut you, and some challenges associated with that are growing all the time. The town comprehensive plan is broken into 2 different volumes. One volume is called Conditions and Issues. It contains current conditions, trends, and projections for future land use and population growth. It doesn't provide any policies or directions. So if you're looking at what the town thinks about this issue or that going forward, you won't find it there. We do have a draft update of that volume as part of our process already completed. It's available on the town's website. You can kind of navigate your way through there and get to that information. What we're really focused on now is the second volume, the vision and directions volume. So that is the kind of the guts of the plan. It provides the overall framework for what the town wants to be in 20 years, some broad goals, and some specific initiatives of things that the town may take on to achieve its vision. One of the things, and one of the key things it includes that the town uses and relies on a week-by-week and day-by-day basis is this future land use map and the policies that influence how we get from how land is currently used to how land is envisioned on the map. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about that during this meeting today. So we began the process to update the plan in wintertime. We have done a couple of things since then. Working on that conditions and issues volume was a big part of it, and also a community survey that I'm going to talk about. From here forward, we're really focused on preparing that key and crucial vision and directions volume, which we'll do over the course of the summer. We'll have an opportunity for you to take a look at that in late summer or early fall, along with the Plan Commission. And then we'll have a chance to revise both volumes to respond to comments from the community and from the Commission. We anticipate at this point we'll be in a position to come forward for public hearing and potential adoption of the plan by the end of the year. And then it gets processed through the county, and the county also goes through a similar process, which probably will be taking us beyond the new year. So we're closing in on halfway through our process. The process does provide opportunities for community input. The Plan Commission meets regularly to talk about it. Our next meeting will probably take a couple months off to actually get some words on paper and maps changed. But in August, we'll be back at it to work on the plan. Those are all public meetings with opportunities for input. As I mentioned earlier, we had a community survey in March and April. You might have taken it. It was intended to gather input on the town's vision and priorities regarding development and preservation. I'll talk about some of the results in a second. We had 213 folks that took the survey. And they broadly represented the sort of the demographics of the community when we parse that off. You can look at all the survey results. In fact, we had a copy in the back of the room. We have got them available on the web page as well. This input session is a big part of our process. Both the information we'll get from you tonight, from folks who are online, and from folks who might be listening to this recording later on and have an opportunity to comment. We're focused here on the future land use map and the policies in the plan that guide it. Kim, with data provided by the county, sent out notices to 146 property owners, everyone who, according to county records, owned 35 acres of land or more within the town got a notice. We'll have another session. We might fold it in as part of a broader session to talk about planning in particular for the northeast quadrant of Highway 12 and N, which we've got some detailed planning work to share about. And then we'll have a public hearing certainly near the end of the process. All along, Kim is working hard with us to get current information available on the webpage to get your information to you and input from you. And we'll have specific, good opportunities in the future to do that. So I want to talk about the community survey. We did it entirely online. We did our best to get the word out. Kim worked very hard to do that. The survey again had 213 folks respond, and these are the results of what those folks told us, at least as it relates particularly to our land use discussion tonight. We asked them to indicate what are the top 3 reasons why you choose to live in the town. And the chart here shows the number of folks who gave their first reason in green, second reason in blue, and third in gold. We just added those up, and by far the top reason why folks chose to live in the town was the rural atmosphere that it provides. Interestingly, the second choice is the proximity to Madison. Those two things don't always work in harmony with one another, and that's why you see the pressures on growth and development here in the town, and the push and pull associated with that. Madison is, providing a lot of opportunity for folks to live close to work and to shopping, but also providing growth pressure for the town. We asked, what if when a town reviews development proposals, what are the most important things? And this tells us a little bit about what is this rural character that folks are talking about. Well, the top priority out of, I think we had 10 or 11, this is just the top 5. But the choices we offered, natural area preservation came out on top, and impact on neighboring farms came in second. So when we think about rural character, I think folks are thinking about, what we see when we look outside, the natural environment, and keeping that preserved. This gets a little bit more in depth, but this, the way you read these charts is, it's kind of the greens and reds and golds are colors that you might be familiar with. We asked about levels of concern with different matters, and if you see a lot of red, there's a lot of concern with that matter. And if you don't see a lot of red, that's not a particular concern. So where we see, a great degree of red is when people were asked, well, is increased development pressure from Madison a concern? Yeah, a lot of people thought it was. Is increased pressure from the village of Cottage Grove? Yeah, a lot of people thought that. And then again, loss of natural areas and open space, increased road traffic, probably correlated with those concerns as well. And so you see a fair amount of red there too. So then we asked folks, what are your future development and preservation preferences? And we laid out, well, residential development, commercial development, et cetera. And if you see a lot of green, a lot of people agreed with that. So you look at the bottom charts and you see town of Cottage Grove should encourage more farmland preservation, a lot of green, a lot of agreement there. Town of Cottage Grove should encourage natural area and open space preservation, even more green or more support for that. When we look at development, we have more of a mixed bag. So when asked whether the town should promote more residential development, more people than not suggested no. Probably about 2/3 suggested no, shouldn't promote more residential development. Commercial development, a little more favorable, about half and half, yes, yes and no. So those were the responses from the folks that took the survey. We also asked a question about geographically where different types of land use, they thought were appropriate. And we gave four different categories: residential subdivisions, farmland with limited housing, commercial development and natural areas and open space. We kind of colored them a little bit, at least what planners think about when they think about those colors. And so the greens represent farmland and natural areas. And then the different areas on that map, 1 through 6, represent, broadly speaking, different parts of the town. And so if I look at this, from easiest to hardest, you look at area 5 and 6, the eastern parts of the town, where the folks that responded suggested, hey, most of this land, or the land use I support the most, are natural areas and farmland east of the village of Cottage Grove. Then when you get closer to the village, things get different, and folks, you see a lot more yellow, particularly in area 1, where you see that the land along BB, more or less between the village of Cottage Grove and the city. More folks saying, hey, that area might be more appropriate for housing development and maybe commercial development. The area that rated highest for commercial development, area 3, that's the Highway 12 corridor, more or less from the Highway N interchange area west. So that got the most red. That's the planner commercial color. So most support for commercial in that particular quadrant. So it gave us some feel and flavor again from the folks that responded to the survey, where they felt as we work on the land use plan map and updates to it, where different types of development may be better or worse. I keep mentioning it was the 213 people that responded. It's not the survey is not the plan. It's one input tool, just like tonight is another input tool. So when we construct or develop an update to the future land use plan and the policies behind the plan, we think about a lot of different things in addition to your input and what the public might be telling us through surveys and things like that. So what are the things that matter to us? Your attitudes and preferences certainly do make a difference. It's your town, and you have the right to influence it as much as you possibly can. Other things that matter is where existing development is located. Where subdivisions have already popped up or commercial development has popped up are in many cases logical locations where other similar types of development may be appropriate. Conversely, where we have a lot of open land that hasn't been developed, a lot of large farms and large parcels that haven't been fragmented, those are areas that are generally speaking more appropriate for continued open space development with fairly limited housing and other development. Soil suitability matters, how productive the land is when the rain actually falls, and where farming is actually occurring. Soil quality is all well and good, but is a land being farmed is also a factor. Natural areas, floodplain, wetlands, other things that you can see certainly matter as to where development or preservation may be more appropriate. Things you can't see, like where soils are of poor quality for building development, also factor into how we work on land use planning. There have been another number of lands in the town over the last 30 years in particular. There are deed restrictions have been applied when there have been development proposals offered. A property has maybe achieved their total number of allotted splits or houses. There's often a deed restriction that's applied to the balance of the land that limit further housing development. Concentrations of those things matter in land use planning too. How much demand for different types of development matter. You know, we're working in a market where we have demand for housing, demand for commercial development, and the town and a service range that the town offers, or in certain cases doesn't. The town does not have sanitary sewer service. The town does not have water service. There's no immediate plans to establish that. So certain types of development are appropriate and drawn to the town, and other types are not. Highways matter, and proximity to utilities, including utilities that you don't control. The number one reason why property owners petition to annex to a city or village is they can get sewer and water and develop to higher densities in that city or village. So proximity to utilities can work to your advantage, but in many cases for the town of Cottage Grove work to the disadvantage of the town in retaining land. And then the final thing that matters for future land use planning are plans and agreements and influences from different units of government, including the county, the regional planning commission, state and its policies for farmland preservation and other things, and neighboring cities and villages and their influence. So I'm going to show you some maps and graphics and get away from this wordy slide soon, but all this information gets put in a big stew or a big pot to form something like this, the land use plan map. So it's art, it's a little art, a little science, and a lot of input from the community. So some of the maps that I'd like to share that are kind of key influencers on our land use planning is this one is the jurisdictional boundaries map, and you see that big red line that I drew. Plan Commission knows what it is, but others probably don't. This is the area of extraterritorial jurisdictions of the city of Madison, the village of Cottage Grove, and probably, although it's not entirely clear, the village of McFarland right now. So everything west of there, if you're doing a land division, has to get approved by that village or city, in addition to the town and the county. Some of those powers of cities and villages have been clipped over the last several years. It's not an absolute yes or no that they can offer in most cases, or a no they can offer in most cases. But they do have some influence over land development in those areas in particular. So you can see that 2/3 to 3/4 of the town is affected by that. The other red line that you see a little bit more tightly drawn, maybe if you squint, is the urban service area line. That's the area within which the village and the city can extend utilities. I don't know if we have the city of Madison's on there. I think we do, but it's gold, or the central urban service area. Those are also key because those are areas where if I'm a property owner, I can petition, for example, for annexation and know that I can legally be provided with sanitary sewer and water service. So that matters. Those jurisdictional boundaries matter a lot. I mentioned this earlier. This is the existing land use map. This is how land is used today. The green represents open and farmland predominantly, but where you see pockets of gold and red and other colors, those are areas of existing greater concentrations of development. So that has mattered in the past as to where the town plans future use. Along in south of here right now has been an area for subdivision development, and some additional development has added on to that over the years, as one example. I mentioned soil suitability is a factor. The colors on this map make that purple pop up out huge. What that is areas that are underlain by potential sand and gravel deposits, which have been a big part of the development and land use pattern within the town, concentrated, in particular, at least for undeveloped areas in the southeastern parts of the town. But the other areas, if you look deeper into this map, the darker the brown colors, the better the soil quality for farming. So you see some patterns there. Some of the best areas for farming, unfortunately, have developed in the village and near the village, but there remain some high quality areas elsewhere in the town. And again, broadly speaking, the southeast third of the town probably has the best quality soils. I mentioned earlier, we look at natural areas and areas that have building limitations. This map shows in different layers those types of limitations. Again, you see the brighter colors on the map. I think those represent floodplain boundaries, in particular, what you're seeing in green, often overlay with wetland areas, and certainly influence what types of land uses are possible or development is possible. The other features you don't see as prominently here, but steeper slopes, the drumlin sides, things like that in red, and the brown areas, and those are areas of hydric soils where in the past they might have been wetland, but perhaps 100, 200 years ago they were drained, tiles installed, other things to make them tillable land. But that might make them very good farmland, doesn't always make them very good sites for new housing or other types of development. This map we prepared with the great assist from the county over the last few weeks, and it deserves a little bit further study, probably more than we have time for today. But this shows areas or parcels that have been subject to deed restrictions, often applied when someone petitions to rezone land or subdivide land for development. And in many cases, they limit the future development of the remaining pieces of land. So where you see concentrations of these dots, you probably have less opportunity to plan land for development than when you see fewer concentrations, all other things being equal, because there's a legal restriction on developing those lands. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to, for example, plan significant areas of housing development or commercial development where legally it can't even happen. Now I get back to a lot of words again. So one of the things I mentioned was important was future development demand. So as part of our work as your technical advisors in the town, we tried to project how much demand you'd have for different types of land uses through our planning horizon. 20 years, we go, I guess, 24 years through 2045. So we project the anticipated demand of about 500 acres for new rural housing development, including a flexibility factor, and about 500 acres for new commercial development. So just coincidentally, roughly similar totals. What does 500 acres mean? Many of you know this like the back of your hand, but others don't. A section of land is about 640 acres, about 1 square mile, and there's about 31 square miles in the town, or about 20,000 acres. So to combine that, those totals on the top represent about 5% of the land area in the town. This next bullet is new information. I think even for the Plan Commission, I know it is because we just put it together today with the help of our mapper. The adopted version, this map to my left, has about 600 acres of undeveloped but developable land that are planned for neighborhood or housing development. That's gold that you see on this map. And close to an equal amount that are planned for commercial development. That's the red or the salmon color you see on that map. So this takes out the lands that are already developed within those areas. It also takes out the lands that are undevelopable because they're wetland or floodplain or have another one of these things. A lot of caveats to this information. Well, you'll see a lot of this gold area in particular is located, right next to the village. And so there's more than one entity at play here. Those property owners have, some choice. They can attempt to develop their land in the town, or they can instead petition to annex to the village. So not all that land is likely available for future town subdivision development. So that's one caveat. The other caveat I'll offer, it's on the screen, is that the town has and will continue to have housing development in the area in green. And in the area green is the ag preservation area. And by policy there, landowners are allotted one home or one residential density unit per 35 acres owned. So a fair amount of the housing development can and could be accommodated within ag preservation areas, in addition to those gold areas that are specifically designated for subdivisions. Yeah, go ahead, question.
How many of those are left in the county?
How many splits are left? It's a good question. So what we need to do with this data that I had on the previous map is kind of total that up. I do not have that off the top of my head, but it is very much a part of the stew, I think. We did work. We also worked for the town of Springfield, and we did an exercise where we figured out how many are left, and to precisely do it and figure that out took about 60 or 70 hours of work, because you have to go parcel by parcel to kind of figure that out and refer to the detailed plan. So I don't think we'll be able to do that as part of this work, but I think we will and should be able to provide an estimate of that, but I don't have that right now.
The bigger question is, what happens when there aren't any more?
So I'm going to, for the people that are home, I'm going to repeat the question. The question is, the first question was how many splits are left in the town within the area? And the second question is what happens when they're all used up or most of them are used up? At that point in time, the plan policies could change. You know, the town could either say, well, sorry, you know, you used up your splits, farmer A, and that was your choice. Farmer B, you didn't. You still have them. That could be one potential future. Another potential future could be a replenishing of splits in some way, shape, or form to say, hey, we've reached our build out. We still have demand in the town. We want to accommodate demand for new housing. Let's replenish them in some way. Or, you know, and that no towns, and to my knowledge, in the county has done that yet. We're not that close to full utilization of splits. Nick, I wish I could remember what % in Springfield had been used up, which is kind of similar to here. See if you can find, I think we put it at the bottom of that spreadsheet. But so it really hasn't been broached as a practical problem yet. It's more of a theoretical issue at this point. All right, so I'm going to transition now to talk a little bit about the future land use map in more specifics, and then by all means, let's make this more of a conversation here tonight. The current comprehensive plan of the town has a vision statement. This guides the town as it thinks about how the rest of the plan, including the future land use map, may look. And the current vision statement, as written in the plan, reads: at the edge of an expanding urban area, the town of Cottage Grove is also on the cutting edge of preserving farms and a rural livelihood. And then it goes on to say the town works to preserve its land-based productive farmland and continue farming, embraces resource preservation in an agricultural setting, guides housing development away from farming areas and towards developed areas, encourages rural and ag support businesses and planned locations and intensities, provides a quiet location, I should say, for rural living close to the city, and then seeks cooperation with neighbors, county, and the state to advance the vision, recognizing either the opportunity or a quandary the town is given how many people live so close. So part of what we want to do is, with this planning process, is to either reconfirm or challenge this vision in total or in part to make sure that we're still on the right track, because it does influence, you know, those specific decisions on how parcels get designated on a future land use map and how people perceive they should be designated. So, you know, while I have it up, I'd welcome any immediate reaction that people have to this. And I guess I would extend, I'll look to the people in the room, physically in the room here, and then see if there's anyone on the Zoom that has any particular and immediate reaction to this as your vision or what you think the town's vision should be for the future. We'll go to the Zoomers very quickly here. Is there anyone online that would like to offer any opinion or thought or question about the vision statement that's in the current comp plan? All right, we'll keep going. Well, this will be a part of what the Plan Commission needs to do. So again, as an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, this is an opportunity for folks to say what they like and don't like. and after this meeting too. Future land use map. Let's get into that in depth now. It depicts a 20-year land use pattern that town advises to carry out the vision and specific objectives that are listed in the land use chapter, focusing on ag preservation while still protecting fiscal viability and borders. What does that mean? It means that some development does help the bottom line of the town, and that is part of the town's overall future. Where should that development occur? The land use chapter says around, generally speaking, around areas of existing development and near highways. The future land use chapter, or the land use chapter, also suggests that the town will attempt to balance community interest in land use with preservation of landowner rights. That's a big part of why you're here tonight. You own significant amounts of land in the town. You have influence and should on future land use pattern. Emphasizing quality for future development, the town has ordinances and other things in place to make sure that the new subdivisions are designed to appropriate standards. New commercial development has some building landscape qualities that contribute to the character of the town rather than detract from it. And then another attempt for this future land use map is to maximize the voice in future land decisions in the Cottage Grove area. So what does that mean? Well, areas that we know are planned for development by other units of government are areas that we're focusing on too, either through intergovernmental agreements or through also planning for development within similar areas to provide some choice to those property owners who are in those locations. So this one I'm going to actually buzz through because I replaced it with a lot of the information you saw earlier today, and I just forgot to delete the slide. So this is that demand kind of question and the things that we use to prepare the map. So the current version of the future land use map, I've referred to it a few times. It's on screen right now and it's to my left. This is the 20-year vision for land use within the town. It's not the current zoning map. Current zoning is sometimes different, but this is the map that guides the town in deciding whether zoning ought to change, and if so, to what zoning district. And this map is broken into 6 main categories of future use. I'm going to walk through each of them now just to explain them, and then I will also offer that the plan, each category has 1 or 2 pages of often pretty darn detailed policies that guide decision making within those areas. And I'm happy to talk about those policies as part of this, but my kind of overview presentation doesn't get into them in depth. So the one you see the most of on the screen is areas that are planned for agricultural preservation, where the predominant goal is to maximize opportunities for farming in the long term. And to protect existing farm operations that are in those areas from encroachment by incompatible uses, lots of housing development, other things that make it more difficult or challenging to farm. The ag preservation area unlocks certain opportunities for those farmers that choose to take them, include farmland preservation tax credits available through the state of Wisconsin. Housing is not restricted in that area. There are opportunities for housing, but the maximum density of new housing within those areas on green on the map is 1 house for every 35 acres owned. So for example, if you own 160 acres, you take 160, divide it by 35, get 4, and that's how many lots that can be carved off from that farm tract. That's a very gross simplification, and I'm sure some of the plan commissioners are cringing when I made it so simple, because it gets complicated, certainly. This area I'll go through fairly quickly. It's not mapped too extensively. It's the ag transition area. It's mapped predominantly in the east side of the village of Cottage Grove. These are areas that are anticipated for development within the next 15 years. And therefore, by farmland preservation policy could not be in ag preservation areas. So again, it affects a few hundred acres of land east of the village. Open space and recreation area, that's the green on the map. Again, not affecting much land, also east of the village. In this case, I think reflected a landowner preference with the prior plan preparation. Generally intended for open space preservation, generally not prioritized for farming. So a conservancy type area. These are the areas that I've talked about already. The gold areas on the map, neighborhood development areas. So these are areas that if you are interested in subdividing land, would be the priority areas for new residential subdivisions. They're generally mapped, again, near areas of existing residential subdivisions, ideally in infill locations where there are already subdivisions located. And they're planned for single family housing on smaller lots, and also do provide opportunities for kind of corner commercial development and things like that that are compatible with this setting that's mostly residential. But most of the time, 99% of the time, they're single family house areas. Commercial development area I talked about a little bit too. That's the area in pink or salmon on the map. These are areas that are intended for a range of business types, ideally focused on agriculture, but in any case focused on types of uses that don't require heavy water use or sanitary sewer discharge, or in this case septic discharge, because the town doesn't have those public facilities with them. So where these areas are predominantly planned are just east of the landfill, the southwest edge of the town, and in the County N Highway 1218 interchange area, where we see some commercial development happening, right now. And then small areas elsewhere, including existing older ag-related businesses just south of us here at the town hall. So we've had quite a bit of flex and discussion about those commercial development areas over the last two plan amendment cycles. The town has considered amendments every year, and some discussion on new opportunities associated with commercial development on the south side has been part of this process, and we've actually worked on a map that I'll share in a bit on that. Oh, in fact, it's right here on this next page. So this is a draft of a development plan map. If you're interested in this or you own land in this area, this is northeast of the 12 and interchange, including lands on both sides of North Star Road, north of Highway 12. And so this is a more detailed effort to plan for that particular area as an economic development center for the town. It shows planned commercial development predominantly in this area, and it shows a potential road pattern to interconnect those areas. So we might have, for instance, a key point is a road connection between North Star Road and Highway N as part of that, to provide more depth and opportunity for commercial development in that location. So if you're here in either live or on Zoom and you own land in that area, we're happy to talk to you about that. We are going to have a specific opportunity a little bit later in the process to talk about the ins and outs of this area before it gets finalized. Unlike this map to my left, this is not yet part of the comprehensive plan, this draft map. It was put together last summer in response to an opening up of this area for additional commercial development. All right, so that does conclude my presentation. So my goal was to give you some sense and foundation as to what we use when working on the future land use map and future policies, and to provide a little bit of understanding as to where the town is currently at in its future planning. Again, just to provide this kind of common level of understanding so we can get input from town property owners as to what you'd like to see for the future, and add that to the stew that I talked about a little earlier. So what I suggest we do right now is, if you have general comments, questions, or discussion points that you'd like to offer, let's bring them up here as a large group. If you have particular preferences on your piece of land, my guess is you'd like to share them in a little bit more private way, and that would probably work best for everyone anyway. We've got a comment form that if you don't have a copy, we have copies in the back of the room. I'll talk a little bit more about that form in a second. You can either share them with one of us here tonight. You can come up to us with your form or without, and we can talk about your property after we kind of break as a large group. Or you can think about it for a while and get forms to us no later than July 9th. You can drop them off during normal business hours, or you could email them to Kim at that address you see on the screen right now, and you can grab that on the town webpage as well. So what is the form? It's got two sides. The first side of it is the current future land use map from the already adopted plan, the one that I've been talking from. And it has the different categories listed. We'd love to get information on who you are and how we might contact you if you have comments or questions. Where you own property or where you have a comment on how the plan represents, if it's not your land. If it is or it isn't your land, then we'd like you to check yes or no, so we kind of get a feel for it. And then, especially if the map doesn't reflect your preferences for future use, or the policies that you're aware of behind that map don't reflect your ideas, we'd love to hear what your ideas are. And if you could share with us why you think your property might be different than the ones around it, unique characteristics that we might not be aware of because we don't own your land, that would be great, because that provides a rationale for thinking about the change you might be suggesting. The back side of this is just sort of the key for these areas. And then I've got a copy, and there was a copy maybe floating around in the back of the room of the very detailed policies that get behind these colors that we're happy to talk to you about, or if you want to study them yourself, you can tonight or after tonight.
Do you have an online person who has a question?
Very good.
When there are conflicts on the planning maps between the town, village, and county, which plan prevails?
You have a three-sided coin. First off, there should not be conflicts between the county plan and the town plan, because the way this works is that the town, first of all, we work closely with the county on the plan preparation. Here, we've got a county planner in the back of the room here today, and we'll continue to work with her and the staff at the county on the plan development. At the end of the process, how this works is that the town will adopt the plan and then ship it off to the county for its adoption as well. Often, usually, that works seamlessly and quickly. Sometimes the county says, well, we didn't really care for this particular plan amendment, or would you reconsider it? And then it gets kicked back, but eventually it all gets worked out. So the county plan and the town plan for the town of Cottage Grove are the same thing. The city and village versus town issues, that gets a little stickier, because we do have differences between the plans of the city of Madison and the town, and the village of Cottage Grove and the town in particular, in certain areas. Sometimes the plans say the same thing, like we want housing development. But when it's on the village plan, typically it means we want housing development to occur in the village on sewer and water. And when it's in the town plan, it usually means the opposite. So then it becomes, property owner choice. And that can lead to challenges. It can lead to some whipsawing that occurs, where, the property owner will basically go to the different units of government and try to get the best deal, get the most standards waived, whatever it might be. It's not a good situation. The remedy for that, the best one, is an agreement between village and town, between city and town. There is not currently a boundary agreement that the town's involved with, but the town is in discussions with the city on an agreement. So the best way around that is to unify plans and to come up with some common understanding for how the land could be used. Other questions or comments or suggestions? Yeah.
Just a quick question on the map.
Sure.
As I understand it now, Blooming Grove is no longer in existence. The city has taken that township over, is that correct?
Not quite yet. Close.
It will
In
happen.
the 2020s, the town of Blooming Grove will cease to be.
Now, the heavier line that's kind of jagged on the left side, no, moving in. The next, no.
I'm sorry.
That line, yes.
Yep.
What is that one indicating?
That's the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city and the village. So when municipalities, incorporated municipalities are close to one another,
Yeah.
They split the difference from their statutory extraterritorial jurisdiction. The city legally has a 3-mile jurisdiction when there's no other village or city close by. The village legally has a 1.5 mile, but where they overlap, they don't have overlap. They kind of, there's a formula in the statute that says you split the difference, and this is where the difference lies.
Which happens to be right in the middle of our farm.
Yeah. So it doesn't take into account whether it's splitting parcels,
Mhm.
right, or ownership.
But what does it mean then? It doesn't mean that the Madison side will be determined by Madison, the other side is determined by Village of Cottage Grove, or how does that work?
What it means at its core is that if you want to divide off a lot or more than one lot, you have to get the approval of whichever municipality's extraterritorial jurisdiction you are in addition to the county and the town's approval. That, in many cases, cities and villages view that extraterritorial jurisdiction as, potential long-term growth areas for annexation and things like that, but that's not the legal definition of it. There's other things that could be done, collaborative zoning between the incorporating municipalities and towns. We have a lot of examples of that in Dane County where the city and town have decided to jointly zone the areas. But right now, all of that it really matters legally is that if you want to divide off a lot, you have to go to the city or, for the other side of your farm, the village to get their approval too. Great question.
Do we have a lot of participation in farmland preservation in the township?
Pam, do you know what do you, I put you on the spot here. Do you guys track how many folks have at least conservation plans that may be indicative of collecting?
We do not.
Yeah.
It's probably researchable for land and water, but
yeah,
we are tracking though that 80% rule and see how close all the towns are getting to it. We are doing that now.
So yeah, that's two different things. So the challenge and why Chris asked is that it's Department of Revenue information. So it's your income taxes. So it's private, information, or supposed to be private information. So the DOR knows how many people collect the credit, but they're not sharing it with us. What the first thing that I asked Pam was, in order to collect the tax credit, farmers have to have a conservation plan on file and approved by the county land conservation department. And so that's a knowable thing, and that might be, indicative of the upper end of people taking the credit. But folks could have a conservation plan and not take the credit too.
Question. Because of the fact there's a certain percentage of land that must remain in order for the town to be eligible for the farmers within the township to be eligible for farmland preservation,
Yeah.
a certain amount of percentage
Yep.
of land within the township has to remain or
Zoned.
ag.
That's right.
Okay, now, keeping in mind that we're close, currently, have you run across the situation where, how do you balance the right of, say, all these farmers here that may have, I don't know, say 30 splits between them, okay, and this gentleman over here, who's a commercial realtor from the standpoint of residential subdivisions, okay, how do you balance him against these folks without jeopardizing the farmland preservation thing? Is there a way to do it, or do you flip a coin and say first come, first serve, and then everybody else potentially is left high and dry?
A couple, I don't mean to dance around your question, Steve, but I'll try to get us up to a common level here. And this relates to something that Pam was saying, and Pam, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but for the area you see colored in green on the map, at least 80% of that land by state rule, I think, state DACAP rule, needs to be zoned egg preservation, not just planned, but also zoned. And the town, as has been suggested, is close to that level where, you know, in danger of dropping below 80%. So how we tinker with this map could matter in getting us safer above or below. And you can tinker with the numerator or the denominator in that question. Steve, if I'm off track, let me know, but maybe the question was how do we have the ability to say, hey, you are commercial, you get commercial rights and you don't get commercial rights?
Yeah, and you guys can't use your splits, you know.
Because you're planned commercial.
No, I'm just saying, you know, if we'll use Donnie Vinny right here just as an example because I'm looking at him. All right, Donnie has, we'll say 10 splits, okay? Theoretically, according to our current plan, that's 20 acres that he could theoretically come out of farmland preservation to go to residential.
Gotcha.
Okay. Sylvan could have the same thing for discussion purposes. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got Mr. Dinkle, who is the real estate guy who likes to build subdivisions. All right. And where do you draw the line, or are there guidelines? Let's put it that way, without to keep from showing favoritism, to say, okay, Donnie, you can have 2, Sylvan, you can have 3, and Dave, you can only do 1 5-lot subdivision. You know, and then we're running out of space. I mean, the ability.
Yeah, maybe I'm still not answering your question, Steve, but it's all these factors that determine whether land ought to be planned for subdivision development and where land isn't.
Correct, but I mean, we're almost there right now, and we haven't changed anything yet. I mean, with our current plan the way it is, we're on that edge, if I understand it correctly.
But if land is shown in gold on this map, or shown in the pink and rezoned for development, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect your bottom line. It's really when land is planned for egg preservation and rezoned to something that's not, that makes a difference in that. So if a subdivider's got his property in a gold area that's not developed, it's not going to affect the 80%.
No, it will. When it does affect it is when we take that 80 acres from Sylvan's farm and put it in for
That's right.
Residential. That's when you could fall below that.
That's right. You're affecting, I forget, I'm not a math major, but you're affecting either the numerator or denominator by taking land out of the
farmland preservation.
It's when you create rural lots, basically in areas that are still green, right?
That's a problem, right?
Once they change from green, then your denominator changes, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's a percentage of what's green. It's not like an absolute.
It's a percentage of what's green that has to be 80%
So
zone that
what
way.
hurts more are the scattered housing.
Yeah, and so that would be, you know, that maybe gets to your question a little bit earlier, is what happens when we run out of splits? Well, if you run out of splits and, you know, do this concept of replenishing them, you're going to quickly run afoul of farmland preservation rules, because you're going to be rezoning more land for housing in the areas that are planned for egg preservation. So this is a factor of a lot of things, but it's a factor of the fact, you know, you're a town that's next to a bustling city and a bustling village and have a lot of development pressure, but it's still an ethic And a plan that you saw supports farmland preservation. So there's a lot of tension in that sort of setting. You know, it's easy to be farmland preservation when you're in Perry. Or I'm picking on one. Yeah, it's harder when you're confronted with these kind of difficult choices. And as I'm sure some of your heads are spinning with these kind of strange policies that emanate from different sources that are difficult to get your arms around. Yeah.
So if you have property on here that isn't currently mapped correctly, say commercial property that isn't shown as commercial in red, that can be corrected without affecting your percentage?
If it's commercially zoned right now,
Commercially zoned, current land use?
yeah, it might tinker with the percentage a little bit, but not as much as rezoning additional land that's already green.
The Iverson property doesn't show up. It's commercial from what I can see.
That's because this is future land use, not current land use. So these are areas that are planned for future
development.
commercial. There's also an existing land use map that actually shows zoning, and it will show up on that.
But it shows that property as being green on
That's
future.
the thing. And so that's one of those
Yeah.
properties that counts against that 80% that we're trying to maintain.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't planned for commercial. It's probably been commercial since before we planned.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. I mean, this map is drawn and painted sometimes with a broad brush. There are existing non-conforming uses and non-conforming zonings within the areas that are shown in green, and same with the other categories. So the issue is within the areas shown as in green, not more than 20% of it can be the type that you described. So, and I'll further say that, you know, the ag preservation category does allow some ag-related commercial uses in it too. So you don't have to rezone necessarily for, I don't know this property you're talking about, but
I guess I'm wondering why you wouldn't clean up your map and show it as commercial then for future, if it is commercial now.
it's a tedious.
It's on a highway, it's on,
We
it's
will.
always been commercial.
We will. We'll try to pick all those up and make it correct.
Okay.
Have a question in the back.
Yep.
So this is, you're saying this is a future map?
Yes.
So the areas that we're looking at in gold right now on that map for the future, what are they right now?
Well, some of them are already subdivisions and some of them are just open space. And you can, if you, you know, when you have a chance to approach the map, it's pretty obvious which are which, because you can see a subdivision, you know, development in some, but not others.
So the areas that are gold on the future map don't count against the 80%?
That's correct. Yeah, so if someone, you know, some of that land is not zoned for development right now. A lot of it isn't. But when they come to petition to rezone to, well, I get the county zoning, R1, whatever the zoning district is, that doesn't count against the town's compliance with farmland preservation rules. But it would if on the other side of, say, N, the town made a bigger area gold and rezoned that area for development, because it's taking land out of ag preservation, thereby affecting the denominator, right?
So at some point, there was sometime there was a starting point where they stabilized the map and said, you know, when the.
Yeah, well, the map, you know, the map is in flux. That's why we're here tonight, because we can change the map. But we're limited as to how much we can change it and still remain a town that is engaged in the state's farmland preservation program, thereby affording farmers property tax credits.
Mark, if we get to where we are under that threshold, what happens next? I mean, obviously, the farmers cannot claim any credits if they already, you know, they may not already.
Yeah.
But definitely then they cannot. Does that open up another window for the direction of the town as far as with how we use our land?
Well, what happens? The town could potentially be decertified as a farmland preservation eligible town And then and that's why Chris asked the question, and he's interested in knowing, well, how many people are taking advantage of this credit? If it's a lot, then that would financially affect a lot of people in the town. If it's not, then it wouldn't. And there are towns that have elected to not participate in the farmland preservation program that are still supportive of farmland preservation. It's not either or necessarily, but it does point to, again, this question of what do you want to be? Is what you want to be that vision statement I had up, or is what you want to be something different? And it's not saying one is right or one is wrong. It's just establishing a vision and then kind of sticking to it as you get proposals that might challenge it is the key.
Don had a
I mean,
question.
dumb question again, but we don't know how close we are to that threshold. I mean, if in the next 3 or 4 years, if somebody comes and if there's 10 or 20 lots, I mean, you're talking 40 acres. All of a sudden.
Yeah, I think Pam knows how close we are. I think
Yeah, that's
we're,
what I was wondering.
Well, I didn't bring the table with me, but we're starting to calculate this and in fact include it in our staff reviews now, just to let the towns know.
Yeah.
Your town actually more actively thinks about lot sizes, whereas some towns don't. Like, oh, a 16-acre residential lot, we're like, tone it down. You guys are like, 82%.
yeah.
And I don't have the table in front of me. You're not
Yeah.
as close as some other towns, but you're
We
definitely in the top
gotta
5
watch.
or 10.
gotta watch. Yeah, we
gotta
have
watch.
been, when we've had some bigger proposals for taking land out of egg preservation on these plan amendments, we've tracked that. So we know the number. I'm sorry, I don't have it up.
And it's
I
not
don't want to make it
just
up.
purely just so, and I know it's confusing, it's very confusing. But just like Mark said, so look at what's green, the light green, and we're talking about 80% within there.
Has to be also zoned that. for
Right, it
egg
has to be
preservation.
zoned that. So as people use their splits, they tend to have some scattered residential, you're talking about commercial that already exists, so that comes out of it. All towns do what this is. This is not this future land use plan map. There aren't any towns that right now anyway do a future land use plan map and reflect all those little yellow boxes and call them part of that land use district.
Right.
So that makes it confusing as well. So, the fact that if something's shown that you're planning it for commercial, then that's that denominator. It's the thing we were talking about and Kim just talked about was you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. What you're worried about is what's happening in that light green.
Yeah. So to your point, we know of, you pointed out a parcel. There are some parcels that just, may have no business being in the egg preservation area. They're collections of, lots and other things. And we can definitely and would like to clean up those areas, but I wouldn't anticipate that we'll identify every split that has been taken with every house and take it out of the farmland preservation area. There's no reason to, because that farmland preservation area allows one house for every 35 acres. It's perfectly consistent to have that very low density housing within the egg preservation area. But where we see, big areas of inconsistency, yeah, we can work to clean the map up.
You wouldn't want to do that anyway because it would indicate, the plan sort of talks about infill and doing more of the same where it already is. And so
Yep.
maybe some of those areas aren't areas that you would put more commercial,
Yep.
put up with what's there, but you wouldn't want to look at it and say, oh, there's already.
That's right,
commercial
as a
here, let's
launching
do some
pad
more.
for more.
Yeah.
And that we had a discussion on that. We had a proposal in the southeast part of the town for residential development and a change to the map. And it was a similar issue. There's a collection of 8 or 10 existing lots in that area that I think were mostly, if not entirely, the result of kind of caching splits that were available. But that doesn't mean that ought to be a launching pad for another whatever lot subdivision adjacent to it. It was a way to preserve a lot of land around it, presumably by bringing the splits all to one spot, but it wasn't intended to be a pad for more.
Do we have, this question's probably more for Pam. But do we have too much commercial land? It seems like we have a lot of open commercial land that's, I mean, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Do you have too much commercial land?
Well, I think as you've done amendments, you can see where people said, I don't want to be in commercial. When did I get in commercial? That's really up to the town to say what amount seems appropriate. And some of that is, quite honestly, landowners' response to opportunities they've had, or they feel like they have of selling and developing their property, that it's more commercial. So it's more what's the town comfortable with. And I think the other thing that I would critique is what it sounds like the town is already addressing, which is to have this big of swaths of commercial without planning more deeply about how that's laid out with infrastructure and roads, and sort of do it willy-nilly. You're not going to get the quality of commercial development you're after. And as a result, you will not get the value that the town may anticipate they will get out of that. So that it sounds like the town is responding to that in a way that I appreciate for sure.
Yeah, certainly that's the goal with the plan for that area here. Now, this larger area adjacent to the city is a hard area to figure out. This could be an area that at least parts of it don't end up ultimately being in the town. So, that has to factor in as well. So by the numbers, you don't have to look at this chart again if you don't, or this graphic again if you don't. By the numbers, we're anticipating that we could see demand for about 500 acres of development, commercial development in the town over the next 25 years. And we have planned about 600 acres that has yet to be developed for commercial. So that tells me we're in the ballpark of where we should be. It's not outlandish. I work for a lot of cities and villages, and especially in the world of Amazon, they have vastly high expectations for commercial development. Everyone's got to take a look at the plan and really think about that. The town commercial areas are not generally things that are developing with stuff that you can get on Amazon, school bus ride, for instance. So I think you're still okay, but large areas for retail, commercial service development is just not going to happen. And that's why you probably have seen and heard the city of Madison planning for the East Town and West Town malls, the big box future of those areas.
I just think it's interesting that you have a group of people and everybody has different knowledge bases. And Mr. Dave Mule, do you know what farmland preservation is if you have 200 or 400 acres?
It's either $5 to $10 an acre.
So if you have, I read online that it's about $7.
$7.50. Yep.
And so 200 acres is $1,500.
I'm not the math guy.
Yeah. So 200 times $7.50. So if you have 200 acres of farmland, your savings in the farmland preservation program is $1,500 a year, assuming all the rest of your stuff is in line.
Mm-hmm.
You have 400 acres, it's $3,000.
It has made more sense for large farmers than for small, because the paperwork, is the same, regardless of whether you own 100 or 1,000 acres, roughly speaking.
So can we change topics a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, do you know if the solar development on the county, is that all within that pink area that we have on the future land list, or is it any of it outside of that? Is it all on the west side of Pembroke?
No, it's on the east side. Or
A little bit.
it's the south side?
Or south or west side?
Yeah.
Does any encroach on the opposite side of Pembroke? I don't know.
On the north side?
Yeah.
I think so. I think some does.
So we should probably, what's gonna happen with that?
Pam, are utilities exempt in farmland preservation or FP 35?
Well, it depends on exactly what they're doing. I would say another solution is to create a land use district for it. I don't know if that's something you'd entertain, but Mark, what do you think of having a public utility? You know, some plans have institutional government.
Institutional, yeah.
And then that would, the math wouldn't, it wouldn't go against that math, that 80% math, unless you're thinking about, we're kind of in a conversation. There's a number of, I mean, this solar thing is nothing compared to one in Christiana, now one in Dunkirk, and so on and so forth. And there's still, DATCAP's still sort of struggling with how they're going to treat that. Are they going to consider a solar farm a farm? You know, some states do. I mean, this is sort of a national sort of topic. So that's a little still up in the air, but you know, in the meantime, for the purposes of the town, right now, maybe considering a different district, a new district would be worthwhile.
Tied in with that, this is a future land use map. Should we change the orientation of AB to reflect the new?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could drop in the
plan.
get from the state the layout and then drop in that on the plan map. That makes good sense.
Is it set in stone now or
Where the bridge is going to be, yes.
not? Okay.
Yeah, and you know, the plan map, it doesn't have to have the final version on it. You know, we have some, you know, this isn't the zoning map. We have some flex and flow to it. Other general questions and comments? So is there anyone on the call that wants to offer a comment? I see him dropping away, boring him to death. The equivalent of walking out of the room, right?
It's easier online.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna start calling on him to make sure they're even there.
Mark,
I know how this goes.
let's have a little discussion on deed restrictions.
Okay.
And how you understand deed restrictions and what they actually do and don't do. They don't preserve farmland forever. If that land was deed restricted by the town and the county because you built a house, but at some year it gets annexed into a city or village, that deed restriction is gone.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to protect it any at the point that it changes into a city or a village. So I guess my question is, would you want us to look at some other mechanism, another third party?
Yeah.
That would protect that land, no matter what jurisdiction it was in? Is that something that would be important to the farm community?
It's, you know, as if you're thinking about it, it certainly is possible. And again, in Springfield where I'm working, they have a TDR program too. They just approved a transfer. The sending area property is within a quarter mile of the city of Middleton. The town, recognizing the weakness of deed restrictions that you just mentioned, was looking for another avenue. The conservation easement tool was that avenue they pursued. And based on advice from the town attorney, they felt that finding a third party holder that has conservation as a focus would be critical to allow that easement to survive annexation. In other words, the property could still be annexed, but that wouldn't eliminate the rights or create the right to develop a subdivision or commercial on it. So, you know, and I'm happy to, I see her nodding, that's good. But I think that's the avenue to pursue. But in that case, the town is still, you know, open to deed restrictions in areas where they see no, you know, 100-year, 200-year opportunity for annexation as a simpler tool. But for areas that are closer to the municipalities, they are looking at that.
Yeah, the majority of ours are in that southeast corner.
Yeah.
But
I would say also most owners want to petition to annex because they intend to develop it. And cities and villages are looking to accept that because they're looking to develop it. So I don't know how, I mean, what you're talking about is absolutely correct as far as that third party and maybe Springfield is thinking that'll hem, Middleton a little bit. But I mean, just the reality of annexation is the general purpose or what triggers it is people want to develop it. So, but
Well,
you're absolutely right as far as making it permanent would be this third party conservation easement, or you could do a PDR and then have that third party. Well,
That's what I was gonna ask, is you can do both, so,
the town could have a fund to do PDR
oh,
and then do
PDR,
the same thing, purchase a development right.
but can you, like right now, most of our deed restrictions is because of transferring a development right. So can the same parcel transfer a development right and have a conservation easement on it with a third party? Or are those two different things?
No, they aren't. So the
Yeah.
easement I'm working on for the town of Springfield is about 160 acre farm, 140, something like that. They transferred one of their rights away. They still have two left. The conservation easement says as much. This farm has two development rights. So they still have the ability to develop, and it specifies even where they can use the right and where they can't. And then it also, by amending the conservation easement in the future, would allow them to transfer those additional remaining two rights. So it doesn't mean that all rights are extinguished when you have a conservation easement on it. There could be some retained if the town policies had rights left on that farm.
but it would in that land as farmland, no matter what municipality
Right.
it ended up in, if that's what the current farm owner wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, in the case of Springfield, their Harbor Pride Farms is the third party holder. So they're trying it that way.
Something to think about if that's something that you would want us to look at and maybe include in our update here. David?
So one of the things that we have to think about too is if you're a farmer in the town of Blooming Grove who did a TDR program back then, and he's got that right, and now the city owns it, I don't know how permanent you want that to be farmland.
Well,
With traffic and everything else, it may not be the best idea to keep it permanently. This is a 10 to 20 year plan, not a 50 to 100 year plan.
So I'm going to share with you when it gets recorded, I'm going to share with you the Springfield one. Springfield one has an out for that very reason you're describing. The out's not easy. The out is that it takes, first of all, it's a generation, 20, I don't know what, it was negotiated, 20, 25 years or something. They can't ask for it to get out of it before that. And then it secondly says that the town will consider it as well as twice as much land of equivalent quality in the town is restricted in exchange.
Can you explain that? Just
Yeah, so the farmer restricts his land, wants to get out of the restriction, maybe because he's surrounded by development on four sides 50 years from now, or the kids are. And the towns and your Harbor Pride Farm says, okay, well, you're past the 25-year thing, we'll consider it. But we'll only consider it if you can find twice as much land elsewhere in the town to lock up.
so transfer that restriction somewhere else.
Right, yeah, more or less. You just restrict it. You have that conservation easement released at the same time another one is recorded on twice as much land. It could be 6 miles away. But that's how they've dealt with that possibility. It's not easy.
Interesting.
But,
It may not make economic sense either.
Yeah.
At that time.
well, that's why that owner, and he thought very hard about it. He hired an attorney. It took a year, 18 months to figure this out because he was thinking about all those things. And it wasn't, this farm wasn't at the doorstep of Middleton. In fact, Middleton and Springfield have an intergovernmental boundary agreement that says where Middleton can and can't grow. And it wasn't in the Middleton growth area. It was outside of that. So that's where you typically see it and happening. And when you get a shrewd municipality, city or village they know what happened in the town of Dunn to McFarland. And they're gonna say, don't use your conservation easements in this area that you agreed to allow the city or village to grow into, So you might be confronted with that very issue.
So once something's annexed, if the city of Madison decides to annex something out here, if they can, it's in their area, then the deed restriction's gone.
Yeah, likely any of those dots that you see that are, close to a city or village, if those lands are annexed, then that restriction is likely gone because almost all of them were instituted by the town and county as part of a rezoning process or a land division process or both.
Yeah.
So the dots that you see restricting land, so to speak, that are, across the street from the city or across the street from the village probably don't have a lot of influence on future planning.
You said before, it's not so much the municipality that takes the land, it's more the landowner that asks the municipality to be annexed. Is that correct?
Yeah, legally, property owner, or at least half of the property owners in an area, I'm being very general again, have to petition the village or city to annex. And rarely does a city or village, even with that rule, drag people in who don't want to be annexed. You imagine it's not very popular and people don't like to be screamed at a public meeting. Not that it ever happened to you guys, right? So they try to avoid forced, but the upshot is then you get these crazy boundaries, right? To avoid forcing anyone in. But it is property owner driven, and 95% of the time it's because they want the sewer and the water. Because they can develop apartments, quarter acre lots, other things that they just can't do on a well and septic. It's a hard position you're in. I mean, I don't mean to patronize you guys, but it's hard to do land use planning in the town of Cottage Grove, and there are no perfect solutions. Any other kind of general questions or comments from anyone in the room or anyone on the Zoom? Or I'm sorry, it's not, it's GoToMeeting.
GoToMeeting.
It's like Kleenex now.
Yeah.
Everyone just says Kleenex. Well, what I would encourage you to do, we'll stick around for a little bit here. What I'd encourage you to do is, if you want to, fill this out. This is really the only way that we have sort of documentation as to what you want. Fill out the form tonight. Fill it out later, get it back to us. I think I put July 9th on there as a deadline. That'll help us stay on track. Let your neighbors know that they have a role. We'll make sure we get this in a real prominent spot on the webpage so that people have it. And I think this recording will be also on the webpage.
Yep.
And we'll be back talking to you all probably in 2 months with the map, but we got some good ideas even on specifics here tonight. And if you have, in the meantime, some ideas that you want to discuss with the group, I'm kind of winging this right now, you could put it on the agenda as kind of that thing that Mark said was on target or way off base. We need to set them straight, or get in touch with Tim individually and we'll try to incorporate your comments. But we'll be back in August.
August 25th.
Okay.
All right. We're down to the last item on the agenda.
Would you adjourn?
Second. Motion by Mule, second by Anders. It's non-debatable. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Thank you all.
What?